you got Adrian for a while.
We're live. We're live right now. I'm going to let everybody know. Hey, it's 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock on the West Coast, and we are coming to you live on Facebook and YouTube. I have the amazing author, presenter, facilitator, the founder of Conferences That Work, the amazing Adrian Segar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here, Cameron. Good to see you again.
Beautiful. So I know, because I've had the pleasure, the opportunity, and the good fortune to get you cornered and alone, not only at some of the conferences that we've attended together. And I got to say, there is a warm, special place in my heart for the event profs community and the event camp and the event camps that came out of it, particularly your event camp. I owe my association to Rhinebrook Events and Sarah Weiss, who is an amazing person, to those participatory events. I mean, not only did learning and amazing fun and enjoyment, I always remember the participant-driven session that was participant created, where we were learning about brain science.
That's right. That was 10 years ago, right? I mean, we're talking.
I will never forget it. I will never forget it. So
Andrea Sullivan, yes.
Andrea Sullivan, of course. So I really want to hear about, so that we can share with everybody else, your background. I mean, you're a scientist.
Well, I was
solar energy. So having some of that stuff, and I think that's important because, especially in this day and age, people are not respective of like the scientific process. They're not checking their sources. And I mean, and when I say people, I say, we have 300 million plus people in the United States, and there seems to be an overwhelming, loud majority of craziness going on, right? And not necessarily that same loud sense of reason and listening to science and listening to what things work. And that really makes sense when we're talking about our industry, the event industry, and putting together conferences that work. Are you coming at this with evidence? Have you, created a case that works? Have you proven this? And you're a scientist. And I thought that, for me, that's always been really interesting. But I know there's a lot more to your story, so I'm going to shut up and let you tell it.
Well, I just want to, move off what you just said, which was, you're right. My scientific background, I have an ancient PhD in particle physics from, I don't know how.
I love the humble brag there.
But it is, I'm not a scientist anymore. I haven't been a scientist, but I've had that background. I was trained as a scientist for the first 25 years of my life, and that doesn't, disappear. But the other thing is, and one of the interesting things about, my journey, because as you mentioned, I've done a lot of different things, is that we all have to acknowledge that, human beings we are actually run by our emotions. We like to think we're wonderful, rational creatures and so on, and we make all our decisions are rational, and that is simply not true. According to the science, according to relatively recent science, we know that how we feel about stuff actually has a lot more effect on our behavior than what we think about stuff. So it's always good to bear that in mind, because meetings are a wonderful mixture, of this. This is this wonderful mixture of emotional experience and meeting people and connecting with people around relevant content. And then, the other fascinating stuff that, that you and I and every event prof, knows about all the incredible detailed planning stuff that doesn't matter how you feel about it. You've got to make sure those coaches are there on time and the food, the coffee is ready in the morning. And
let me just unwrap one thing, and I'm going to try to speak less so that my words matter more and let you talk about all the things that are amazing. But because we could talk all day, and I don't want to take us down too many sidetracks, but just the compelling nature of what you're talking about. I was doing an interview yesterday or a few days ago with one of my alumni, and they were talking about the death in their family during high school and how that possibly changed the trajectory of their life. We're a college and career prep organization, the nonprofit that I work with, soundbusiness.org. And here's a person that maybe we didn't serve as well because we didn't understand exactly what you're talking about. How are we taking care of the emotional component of what we're talking about, which is so important in those times? And I just wanted to touch on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I've loved about the meeting industry, which this is my 5th career, and I entered pretty much by accident because I, for years, always found myself compelled to create meetings about whatever I was, professionally interested in, physics or solar energy or whatever it was, or nonprofit work and so on. And I never really understood that. And when I finally, I developed this way of doing meetings by accident a quarter of a century ago, which people loved, and eventually published this first book, this Conferences That Work. I guess over 10 years ago now.
I got my copy.
You got your copy too. Good. Keep it up. And
let me say this, because you said this is your fifth career. So why don't we just tick those off so people understand?
Okay. Right. So I did it. I was a researcher, a postdoc in high energy particle physics. I worked on the big accelerator at CERN. I was lucky enough to work on probably the most important experiment in the second half of last century in high energy physics with neutrinos. And then I fell in love with Vermont, which is what you can see behind me out my window. And moved here. You can't do particle physics in the middle of the woods, and so I started a solar energy business. This is the 70s. And
so let me start. So we started with particle physics, right?
Right.
And then you decided to move to Vermont. No particle physics opportunities in Vermont, and so you decided to open up a solar energy business.
Yeah, I mean, gas. If you're old enough, you remember, and it was 1970. What was it? 1980. The gas went to $1 a gallon, and everybody freaked out. From a quarter to $1, and so this was solar thermal, by the way. I'll just say that it's photovoltaics was still very expensive. So this was panels that with glass on them, and you heat it up. In my neck of the woods, antifreeze, and I'm sitting in the house I'm sitting in still has a lot of those. I've been running for 30 years now, heating the hot water and keeping the house warm at night in the winter. And so anyway, that was my second career. And I actually, during that time, I organized some of probably the earliest solar energy conferences in the United States. And, they were traditional events where it's, you got to get a speaker. You think, well, who are the people who know about this stuff? And you invite them to speak, and they come and speak, and so on. And that went on. And then my solar energy business, my partner and I fell out after 5 years. And it turned out he did me a big favor because Reagan got elected, and the solar energy tax credits disappeared, and the business, which had been doing pretty well, went back down to a few guys in the garage again. And I got a job
because you were ahead of your time, right? You were ahead of your time.
Oh, this is the 1970s. Yeah. So that was the first wave of alternative energy, in this country. So that was a while ago, and everyone forgot about solar.
Second career is solar energy. We went from particle physics to solar energy. What's career number 3?
So career number 3 is there's a little liberal arts college in my town, and when my partner kicked me out of the business, I started teaching computer science there, and because I'd done some sabbatical teaching, I just walked into I'm very, very lucky with the timing, walked into a professorship there, and taught computer science there for 10 years. And this was when the personal computer was just coming in, so 27 years ago or so, the Apple IIes and the IBM PC and all that stuff, and I realized that these things would revolutionize, small business and also and so on. And eventually, I started in my spare time doing IT consulting, And I did a lot of that and ended up basically with 2 full-time jobs, teaching at the college and doing IT consulting. And eventually it was like crazy. So I resigned from teaching after 10 years and did IT consulting full-time for another 10. And during that time,
So we kind of is career 3 and 4. So we were teaching.
Yeah. So three is teaching, and 4 that was going on at the same time was IT consulting. But I also was doing administrative computing for this small school. And what happened, the personal computer came in, and suddenly there were all these small colleges all over and secondary schools all over the United States that could automate their administrative software. Before then, it'd all be done on paper. Student records were all on paper. Only huge colleges had, mainframe computers. So I thought I'd run a conference about using PCs in small schools, and that was the first time I ever ran an event where there were no experts. I couldn't just call up and say, "Oh, I know there's these 10 people," because the people who were doing this, it was a whole new field. No one had ever done it before. Right. So collectively, we were the experts. So I thought, I'll create a conference, and then how do I do this? So I sort of designed a conference where we all got together, and we didn't know each other. So it's like, so how do we get to know each other? So I came up with what turned into a round table, and eventually the 3 questions that are in that first book. And then it's like, well, what do we want to talk about? I don't know what we want to talk about, and also I want to know, maybe there's some people here who have done some really cool stuff that, the rest of us would really like to hear about. So I created this sort of opening session where we learned about each other. We learned about who we were, what we were interested in, what our current problems were, and also what expertise or experience we had that other people might find useful.
Let me tell you, I love this part of the story, because and I always talk about it too, just that idea of problems. And I think that's something that's sort of lacking in the marketplace right now, is that solution room model of an event. People don't like talking about their problems. Everybody's got their problems bottled up. Mm-hmm. But that idea of sitting around a table, sharing your problems with other industry professionals. And we do it sometimes in these networking sessions, but openly, actively workshopping your problems with other people that have experience. What's your biggest problem right now? I'm having a manpower issue. I can't, talk to my people effectively right now. And maybe we can, I want to save this for the end, but, maybe we can workshop. I'm trying to, build community with my waiters, bartenders, and chefs. These aren't folks that are, completely comfortable with the Zoom platform and technology in general. So how do I reach out to them and create community with them during that time? I want to put a pin in that. I want to, keep telling your story. But the power of what you started there has changed my life.
Well, that's great. And I think it's changed a lot of people's lives. I mean, I just invented this out of my own need. And what happened was, and actually that organization has now been running, a conference for 27 years every year. I mean, and it's.
Are you allowed to say the name of that organization?
Yeah, it's cool. It's a small nonprofit. We basically turned this informal gathering into a nonprofit called EdAccess, EdAccess. It's just a sort of niche conference. Maybe 40 to 60 people come every year. Edaccess.org, and that's been running every year ever since we started it 27 years ago. And for a long time, it's the conference for the specialized people who do who have this job.
That's
and what happened anyway? So what happened was I created this, and people loved it, and people started asking me. I was working in the nonprofit sector a lot. I did a lot of nonprofit work for schools and so on. I was doing IT consulting for schools, and people started asking me to use this to run and design other conferences. And after a while, I thought I discovered after 5 or 6 years of doing this in my spare time that this stuff was work. The conference just became what the people who went to it actually wanted and needed it to be. And they loved it, and I got all these, paper evaluations. So people said, this is great. I don't want to go to a regular conference anymore. This was so much better. So that's when I thought I'll write a book about this. which was.
And I gotta say that's been my experience too. Even though I still go to traditional conferences, my experience has been that it's just not as fun to be at a conference where you are being spoken to, and there's just not that kind of interaction that you have at a participatory conference. One of the big things that has been huge for me is my ability to sort of learn from those experiences and bring those to folks. Looks like Adrian's frozen right now, so I'll wait until I get a word from him that he's back on. But the power of a participatory conference where somebody comes in and you feel like you personally are being spoken to in a conference, that you're personally being engaged is a big, big deal. I love that. I think Adrian's back with us. So just that idea that a participatory conference, the way that it interacts with you, the way that, you don't feel like you're being spoken down to, like you don't have information, the idea that every participant is knowledgeable, in terms of the solution room model where, in that room, Adrian's lining up the folks in the room. And how many years do you have experience? How many years do you have experience? How many years do you have experience? And when you add all of that up, there's so much experience in that room. And when you go to a conference that doesn't value and doesn't respect the knowledge in the room, it just doesn't feel the same. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah. Well, David Weinberger said that the smartest person in the room is the room. And the conferences that I create and design and facilitate basically tap that knowledge. And they're designed to tap the knowledge, in real time. So, for example, I was talking about that introductory session where you discover about the other people who are there. And in the process, people have the opportunity to share to everyone any cool stuff that they've done or any experience they have that might be useful. And I don't think I've been to run a conference yet. And I have run, I don't know, hundreds now with this over the last, 10, 11 years since the book came out, where someone didn't suggest something and they didn't even know that it was a big deal. They say, well, I spent the last year doing this kind of thing. And 10 people or 20 people in the room like, oh my goodness, I really need to talk to you about that because we're just about to do that. And, and that person then ends up running a session at that conference. And they didn't even know.
That was the way that session with Andrea Sullivan worked out.
Exactly.
She didn't know she was going to present. And just so you guys know, so the way this works is participants come to, and I just did one virtually the other day, and we were talking about it. The hot, I'm sure I'm going to mess up the name, hot domakozo.
Hot dokimatsu.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I appreciate that help. So, they had that conference the other day, and it was good. It wasn't as good as the conferences that I've been with you, but it was good.
Okay, thank you. I helped them. I actually ran. I came in and designed and facilitated their first ever live conference in Austin, Texas.
So who did you work with at that organization?
So I worked with Liz Lathan there. Is that? Yeah. Well, I worked with all three of them, Tom Spano, and I can't remember her last name, Nicole Osibu. I can't pronounce her. I'm sure I'm getting her last name.
We'll get it later. We'll post it. That's great. Yeah, I had definitely some emails back and forth with Liz. I didn't know that you guys were connected. So again, I love the power of doing things like this. To see the connections, because I was like, in my mind, a little bit was like, why aren't they? Why isn't Adrian Segar involved? Right, and that's great.
Well, it's very common that people. I mean, and I love doing this all the time. Is my job is not to. I hopefully I do a good job at designing and facilitating the kinds of meetings that I like to do, and people hire me to do that. But I always say to them, this is not rocket science. If you see, I'd love to come and do it again. I love doing it. My favorite thing is actually facilitating, live events. And now we're switching to online, which we should spend a little bit of time on. But my goal. If I do a good job, people can see what I do, and and there's enough smart people usually at any meeting, in the organization that sponsored the meeting, who's paid for it, or whatever, who's like, oh, I see how he did that. And then next year they can do it themselves. They don't need, so Liz and Co. Did not hire me again, but that's fine. But I gave them, an initial design, and they've probably changed it, and that's fine. It's their thing. And
I appreciate it, because I think we're all trying to create our own things, for entrepreneurs and companies, and to be able to hire somebody and, hey, this is the way to do it, and now you take it and run with it, because you may have your own slant on it, your own thing. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just me knowing you and knowing the process, I was like, where's my man Adrian on this? Where is he at? Mr. Segar needs to be involved, because I value that. But I do want to talk about online meetings, but I do want to just kind of really wrap our heads around your history. So, particle physics, solar energy, professor, the IT consulting. Now you started creating these events, and I assume the books came somewhat soon after this. Talk to us about that, and talk to us about, your history with the event industry now, and what's been going on the past few months.
Well, sure. So, I spent a few years part-time, because I was still doing IT consulting and so on, writing that first book. And that book came out as I said, in 2009, and I think it was February 2010 was probably the first event camp in New York City. And I went there, yeah, there you go. So, we were, and many of the people who were at that event are, still in, for those who are still in the business, we're still in touch today. And I went there with this book, and people were like, oh, this is very cool. And just like that, I was in the meeting industry. People were really interested in what I had to say.
Event camp, just a little bit, because you know what, especially following this, I call my MPI colleagues out, my conference planners out, my global meetings and incentives organizations. This is it's not the easiest thing to sell to people who are used to doing things the way they're used to doing things, with sponsors and all that. That being said, this is the way, I'm going to say this, people might not agree with me, but this is the way we need to run meetings. This is how you provide value. This is how your industry doesn't get replaced by a YouTube video.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the core issue is a question that every, anyone who is putting an event on has to answer honestly. And it's not like there's one correct answer. Is who is your event for? And obviously, the people who are putting the event on, the organizers, the planners, the sponsors, and so on, they all have their own, desired outcomes and so on, and they're all different. And what has happened traditionally over the years is that unfortunately, is that very often the needs of the participants themselves, the folks who make the meeting possible, get subservient to those other needs.
Yeah.
If you're just trying to run an event and make a ton of money, and you have no morality about it, then you'll run an event like that festival that was,
but also just like, you have your corporate events where, the CEOs are used to running things the way we're going to have a speaker, right? And how do you draw people in? Not to say that you can't have a really great name and draw in on a participatory meeting. You absolutely can. And I look at some people that are sort of getting it. Like I love Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you pay attention to Gary V at all.
Yeah.
But he almost to like his presentation, like he goes up there, he speaks. There's no PowerPoint, there's no slides, and then he's almost pushing people, because a lot of organizations, and I hear him because I consume the content. I hear him at a lot of conferences. They're saying, or he's saying, I know you guys didn't want me to do this, because they just wanted him to get up there and present. I don't know for what, Tom, we're going to ask questions, we're going to participate because that's his style and he wants to get in and he believes that's how he can bring the most value to the participants in there. So he gets it. But not every speaker, not every organization gets it. Can you talk a little bit about the event camps and then particularly about, I mean, it changed my life. So I love people to hear this because I can tell this story later. How the event camps came into your life and how you ended up creating an event camp?
Oh, well, yeah, I actually ran at least 2 event camps. But what happened was, again, end of 2009, Twitter had just come along.
Yes,
and,
indeed.
Twitter, and what happened was that meeting professionals, what I would describe as progressive meeting professionals, found each other on Twitter. Laura McCullough Carter created the Event Profs hashtag, and we all kind of coalesced about that. And I was, I'd just written this book. I had no idea. Was not in the meeting industry formally. I'd been doing all this stuff in my spare time. I wrote this book, and it's like, I don't know if anyone is going to be the slightest bit interested in it. And the first event camp, as I said, was at the Roger Smith Hotel, and we. So I heard about it and I thought, this is the kind of thing I want. This is, experimental. The event camps essentially, and they ran for a number of years, were experimental. They were opportunities for event professionals to try new stuff. We rarely get an opportunity to try new stuff because we have clients all the time, right? We have folks who are, they have their desires, their desired outcomes and so on, and they want those things to happen. And an experiment is risky for us, and it's risky for our clients too, if it's something that's never been done before. So the event camps were a unique opportunity for event professionals themselves to try new things with each other. And as we all have talked about a lot in the last 10 years, failures, you learn stuff from failures. So they were wonderful. They ran all over the country. I ran a couple. There were a few in Europe as well, and then they sort of petered out because pretty much everyone involved got too busy with their work. I'd have to say there was a lot of work putting them on. No one made any money. We were all volunteer, and eventually it's like, this is great, but we love meeting each other, but don't have the time anymore.
Yeah, no, I know that there's still, I heard the other day, there's event camp still in Europe, right?
I did hear one. Yes, exactly. But I don't, I'm not connected with that community anymore. I do have, if anyone ever wants to run another one again, you can contact me and I'll probably be involved. Well, what my rule of thumb is, they need to be 5 people. That's two, Cameron, but I need at least 5 people who are prepared to put, their significant time and energy into making it happen, because it's a fair amount of work. Of course, we could do one online these days. That's our only option right now.
Well, I think there's definitely, I'm trying to tag some of the original Event Profs community, Laura, sending something to Liz, just try to bring some folks into the conversation if I can. But I think there's interest in doing this. I think there's serious interest in doing event camp. And I would very much like to do something on the virtual end that, was big, involved a lot of technology. I think there's an extreme amount of interest. I know there's an extreme amount of interest. My firm that I work with Sarah Weiss, who's the owner and founder of Rhinebrook Events. She, and our group, we are actively engaged in finding the best and greatest tools for the event organizers and organizations that we're working with. My sort of thing right now is that you get a professional company like a PSAV that, can really handle the back end tech, and you use multiple tools so that you can stream in multiple ways. But because Zoom is really good, and StreamYard, which is another application we're doing to create this presentation right now, it can be really good, but everything sort of, it isn't there's so much technology. It doesn't allow you to do everything that you want to do for
Mhm.
some meetings. We talked about before we jumped on here things like Slido, but the fact that you need to be maneuvering between the second screen. So
Mhm.
there are conference technologies that you can do things like right in the window, but that isn't Zoom. So if you want to do the breakout rooms, you need to find a way to incorporate. You got to have a way to bring it all together. So that's probably one of our larger tech companies that really have a handle on this and can manage all the back room stuff so that we can actually do the work of participate. But I think there's a great case that if we can do something amazing like that, that everyone involved in it would really benefit. So, for all the tech companies and tech partners out there, please get in touch with me. You can reach me at Cameron at Rhinebrook Events or Cameron at totheventstaffing.com. And, we're very eager to work with folks, and maybe we can start putting together, one of these event camps for folks where we do stuff. And the understanding is, hey, we're going to try things, and some things are going to work and some things aren't, and that's okay.
Well, that would be great. I am actually, so in the last couple of months, obviously, I've been thinking a lot about what I have been doing for a quarter of a century with in-person events to create, participant-driven and participation-rich events that are really optimal for the participants to actually actively learn about what they want to learn about, and also share stuff that they have that's of value with the other people who are there, and moving that into the online meeting now. And I've actually been writing a whole series of posts recently. If you go to my website at conferencesthatwork.com and go to the blog there, I'm writing just as fast as I can posts about ways of doing the kinds of things that we usually do, routinely in-person meetings that are now sort of, how do we do that online again? So I just, the last two posts I wrote are two really core things. If you have a discussion, how do you decide who goes first, for example? So I just wrote a blog post about that. And I think the week before was, how do you figure out who goes next? You're on a Zoom call with, 50 people, and well, who goes next? And there's, so I wrote a whole post about all the different ways that you can do that. And one of the things that I will be writing about is the kind of facilities, the kind of tech that is needed that does not currently exist, that will allow people to do the kinds of things that I've been doing routinely at in-person meetings for years, but we simply still can't do online yet. But there's no reason in practice why you can't do those things. You can build the tech to do that. And I'm hoping over the next month or two to write, a whole series of articles about, for example, how Zoom could be improved to do the kinds of things that we do. Let's say at a social mixer, at a social break at a conference, where you can, what you could do in person is you can wander around the room, you can eavesdrop on interesting conversations, you can join them, and so on. Well, there's no way of doing that. Actually, there are a few solutions which are pretty expensive that people have just come out with, but there's no relatively inexpensive and rock solid solutions yet for doing these kinds of things. And doing some of the other things. In my second book I have this is a cookbook, The Power of Participation. It's a whole cookbook on how to, of all these different ways you can bring participation meaningfully into a meeting, and through it create connection between people and community and engagement, and and great feedback about the meeting afterwards. And many of the things in that book can sort of be done online, and some of them simply can't. the moment. The tech just isn't there. So there's a lot that can be done with tech, and a blog post I wrote 3 weeks ago about the silver linings of the COVID-19 pandemic is that I'm hoping it will. One of the good things that will come out of this tragedy is that tech companies will put some energy into improving meetings in ways that actually really benefit participants instead of the kinds of meetings that we've been going to for far too long. So I'm hopeful about that.
I want to do one quick thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So one quick thing, because you mentioned it. What's a way that folks can? How do you decide who speaks on Zoom so we can provide some value to folks who are watching this?
Oh, you're talking about like who speaks first,
Yeah.
or who speaks next. I mean, the main issue, of course, is we have less good signaling capabilities on Zoom compared to in a meeting. I mean, but a small meeting, actually sticking your hand up on video is great as long as you've got to have someone in charge, that says, okay, Adrian, you go next, and then Cameron, you go afterwards. And of course, assuming that everyone's camera's on. If cameras aren't on, then the facilitator needs to, check in with the folks who are just in on the meeting by phone, or their camera's off, and so on. And you can also use the text chat in Zoom and ask people to say, okay, I'd like to know next.
Yeah, if somebody from Zoom is watching, the chat feature, which is so useful to have that back channel, but it is not visually interesting. It is difficult to use on just about any device. I have 2 screens set up at home, which I'm very fortunate to have, but I work from home, so I was ready for working from home because I always work from home. I have a basement-based office, which is nice for interviewing employees and all that good stuff. But it's in my home. My commute is down my stairs, so I was ready for this. A lot of people don't have the same resources because they're used to having all their software and hardware at work. So it's a little bit more challenging. So Zoom, one thing that they could really do better is beef up the chat option, make the text look interesting, be able to distinguish things and have it pop up on the screen in a way where it didn't take away from the content, but rather it added to the content of the meeting. So I'd love to see them do that. Going back, because I want to keep us focused on your story, tell us about, I really do want to hear about the event camp, but maybe you want to tell us about the last couple of months and how that's been making you feel and how you've been dealing with it with your business and what you're doing.
Sure. Well, like most people in the meeting industry, obviously all my live events got canceled, and I thought, well, this is a good time for me to recoup and so on. I'm sheltering in place, in Vermont, with my wife and so on. But what's been interesting is I've been starting to get work doing virtual meeting design. There's a lot of people who are I have clients who are running face-to-face events, and they really want to put serious energy into creating really good online events. And I was talking to one of them today, and I said, well, is this just a temporary thing until, hopefully this pandemic is over and we go back to face-to-face events? And they said, no, that's not true. No, we want to do this. We think this is an opportunity. There's a lot of value in doing online event, and because we can do a lot of what we do, which in the past was getting 500 people together for a day from, in this case, all over Europe. And now we can do this online, and we can meet much more often. It's much more convenient for people. It's much less expensive for them, and so on. And we can still give them a lot of the value that they need. And so, but how do you design those meetings so that that they do provide that value, and we don't, and we minimize the downside of online meetings, which is like, oh, this is boring. Well, I'll switch off. I gotta go and do this, and so on, and so on. And the way you do, and of course, the way you do that is by having interaction. And one of the best things, I just want to, I'll mention Zoom, because Zoom does a lot of stuff right. We can all criticize it, but there's a reason why so many people are using it. The breakout rooms in Zoom are really great.
I agree.
They work, they are solid. I mean, considering that the platform is, I don't know, increased 40 times as many people are using it now as were 3 months ago, they've done a magnificent job of keeping the actual technology working. The breakout rooms feature, though, it could definitely be improved. I have a long post in my head of all the things that can be improved on it. Works pretty well. You could do, and in fact, I'm going to be writing a post this week about how you could actually do a peer conference, the kind of conference work that I do, using Zoom. So you'd start off with a piece where you figure out what it is you want. Everyone figures out collectively what they want to do together, and then you go ahead and do it. And you do it all in Zoom breakout rooms. And I think that will work even with the current tech.
I love that, and I just to hammer on them with this chat feature. So I was running one today, which is why it's clear present in my mind. But the idea that when you're in that chat room, so we did the breakouts, and then I can't do the same message to that private person that might have asked me a question while we're broken out in different rooms. So it's just a serious weakness in what they're doing, and now. This is something that, organizations, businesses, people, this gets back to the business advice side of what we're trying to do here, right? Zoom has a great platform. They have a great platform. We're utilizing it. It's much better than a lot of the other things that I've seen. It's much cheaper than a lot of the other things that I've seen. And being both of, a sustainable kind of value and an actual sustainable kind of framework. Like you said, their usage has gone up sky high, and still the quality of it is pretty darn good. I mean, pretty good. I mean, we did a meeting. We had over 30 participants today for the MPI Lunch Bunch that I'm doing every Wednesday at 12, and great meeting. People enjoyed it. Bringing in colleagues, bringing in people that haven't touched base with the chapter in a while. One of the folks who's one of my friends, hadn't really participated in a chapter event period since last February, not this February, not 2020 February, but February of 2019. And there's other folks that I'm sure it's been longer or never that they've interacted with MPI. So we're able to bridge the gap with the online. We are able to provide a different kind of value, and it might not be the same kind of value, but it might be more valuable. We might like what we're doing now a lot better than we did before. And that's not mine. That belongs to a lady named Renee Pride, who said that to me just a little more than a week ago. And it sort of made my mind blow up, because I was like, what are you talking about? I've been building my business for the last 9 years. And I was like, oh, yeah, I think you might be right.
The other thing that I want to mention, and I've been talking about this in person events for years as well, is that the meeting industry has this whole status thing that like a really big meeting is better. It's like it has more. And the unfortunate thing about it is that in terms of what happens at those big meetings, I mean, they all look impressive, and it's true they get bigger budgets, so you can get some really expensive keynotes to come and so forth. But in terms of the value, I think it's become pretty clear. And if I ask if the people who are listening right now, and you think about what were the best meetings you went to, were they these massive, huge meetings with 5,000 people or 2,000 people? Was that the best meeting you ever went to? And not in terms of your experience at the time, but in terms of the value that when you're looking back, you got. And the answer, when I ask that question, the vast majority of the time, most people will talk about small, highly targeted, niche meetings where you're meeting with people who are like you, who have the same problems that you have, who understand what is going on in your professional life, in your world, and you have great process that allows you to connect with folks who it's like, wow, I could do business with these people, like you and Sarah, meeting up at event camp 10 years ago. Those are the things that are really valuable that people like. So what I'm saying is that small meetings, which are really easy to do online, you don't have the whole scale things like, well, I have to go to Ohio, to meet 50 other people. I can do that online, with very short notice, and meet my community, and we can be scattered over. I mean, I did a meeting, EventProf's meeting was scattered over 10 time zones
Right.
a week ago. Right. No problem. And those people would never have met in real life, from Hawaii to
sorry.
Eastern Europe.
How did it go? I'm sorry I missed it. How did it go?
It was wonderful. People loved it. People want me to do it. It was, I wanted to run, it was the old, some of people who are watching probably know, for many years, I ran this thing every week called the Event Profs Happy Hour. It was a video, it was an online meeting.
I was times, yeah.
Right, we did Twitter chats in the early days, and then we switched to video platforms. We ran them for several years on Google Hangouts. Remember those? Well, I guess it still exists. Those kinds of meetings are just are wonderful. So we've been doing these kinds of things for a long time. So and people have said, well, and eventually I gave it up because it was just too time consuming and people were too busy. But when the pandemic came, I thought,
because you're a good guy and you're not charging tons of money for these.
No, I'm not charging anything for these things. Again, my mission, it's probably become clear, Cameron, as you know, is basically I've discovered that I love to, in terms of feelings, I love to connect people, around things that are a matter to them. That's basically everything that all my work is involved in doing that. I get a lot of pleasure from facilitating that, and experiencing, indirectly that happening. So when the pandemic came and I thought, let's run, I suggested we have an EventProfs Happy Hour to talk about how we were feeling, and I think it was a really great meeting. And I started off, with a meeting. I think you used this the other day at your MPI chapter meeting. I said, come up with up to 3 words about how you're feeling right now, just the words. And then we went into breakouts and talked about, in small groups, why we were feeling that way. And we heard these words that you don't usually hear, these feelings at professional meetings where everyone's like, this is a meeting industry. It's a complicated, we run complicated lives. We're really busy. We got to be professional. Yes, there are problems, but we're going to overcome them and so on. And this pandemic has been a terrible, terrible thing for our industry, one of the hardest hit industries. And it's really important for people to be able to have a place where they can talk to other people who do what they do and realize that they're not alone, and say, yeah, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling really scared about my business. I have no work, I don't, and be able to talk about that in a way that is very healing and helpful, to know you're not alone.
Yeah, I think it's so huge. And, I told you, early on, I'm having this issue with connecting my community that isn't necessarily tapped into the internet and social media the way you are, the way I am necessarily. Do you have any thoughts on that? That would be of a personal help to me. I'd love if the audience, and a lot of these, so I've been posting these, so just so people kind of hear the business case feature. We're live right now, and people are tuning in and out. People are working from home. They have families. I'm going to learn how to better promote these, and people will get their calendar together, much as I am getting my calendar together in this weird middle land of, hey, I need to pay the rent, but everything else is closed, and how do I make that work? There's still a lot of opportunity there. So if we can get that message out there, there's still a lot of opportunity to have. And Adrian is a great person to connect with, because I know if I had that conversation with you, hey, I'm desperate and I need to create some financing here, with the experience of your 5 careers, you could probably point me in the right direction and get me a little bit closer to where I wanted to go. And I'm certainly trying to help people, especially on the marketing side. But in that very frame, I'm trying to help my waiters, my bartenders, my chefs, my Toth event staff and community. And it's a little difficult. It's difficult for me to figure out what the right programming is to get people to come in. It's difficult, I think, for them to connect because this isn't familiar. This isn't the everyday landscape for them that they're used to. Everything from, tech problems to just not being comfortable on camera, right?
Right.
All that kind of stuff. And then, am I doing something? Because if people aren't showing up, I got 130 staff and I've never had more than 20 people participate. What am I doing in terms of my marketing on message that isn't really bringing people through the door? And I know some of the answers on that because I've just been using Google Calendar and I haven't been doing any kind of flashy marketing video or photos, which I'm going to definitely try to do. We have a social at 6 p.m. on Friday night, so I'm going to try to get people through the door and produce some of that content today. But I'm interested in your thoughts and how, whether you have thoughts on the marketing message, but once we actually have them there, how I can keep them coming back.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things. I think the thing that, the first thing to remember, always remember, is that you can't please everybody. Every single person, on this earth, responds differently to, things that happen to them, to marketing, and so on. And there are some people that are like, not going to go there, and it's nothing to do with you. I mean, maybe there's something you could have said that would have brought them there, but you have to feel, I mean, you're a good guy. You're trying to do, a good job. You're mentoring, and I try to mentor too. And we do the best that we can. I think the other thing I would want to say that's really important is you need, two other things. First of all, you need to convince people as well as you can that whatever it is you're creating is as safe as possible for people to talk frankly as they feel okay about talking about what's been going on for them. Because that's how you build community. You build community. Human beings, we all need support. We need other people. I mean, the vast majority of us do. There are a few folks who are mentally ill who don't. But the vast majority of us need connection. And what better way to connect apart from, our families and, our social lives and so on, but also we connect around, what it is we do professionally for a living and so on. And we're really interested in meeting with other people, again, who do what we do. You need to create an environment which is safe, where not an environment where it's like, I have to be really professional here. And, and even though I'm feeling miserable, I mustn't show that and so on because I've been having a really hard time, but I have to just be out there. And so that is not, that's stressful for people, particularly these days. Well, so creating a safe environment is important.
The lesson I'm learning from that is, I'm sort of always in the dress shirt and the tie, and that's not really to impress anybody, but that's just how I make myself comfortable. It's just who I am. I'm on all these calls, and the fact that I'm in a shirt and tie sometimes makes me uncomfortable because I feel like maybe I'm making I'm looking like the nerd or the, and I think that's important for people to know is sometimes the way somebody's dressed isn't about you, right? It's just about me. I'm just trying to make myself feel comfortable.
Sure.
But I think, we're changing up the format. I've been doing these at 10 o'clock and then, tomorrow or Friday, we're going to do this at 6 p.m. at night. And it's going to be a social. It's more going to be about music and social. So I'm changing up the format, and
it's great.
And I'm definitely hearing what you're saying in terms of, in terms of promoting this event. I should be promoting the safety of our community and the fact that this is an open place and a nurturing place, which I absolutely believe it is.
And not only promoting it, but then when they come, you need to provide it. So again, the way you provide it is by, there's several things. You model it, and I know that you can do this. You model that, so you talk about stories, that show, your vulnerability. I'm happy to tell people I lost all my work recently, like probably most of the other people in the meeting industry have. that's how it is. It's not great. And I also spent about a week feeling really a kind of grief about not being able to connect with people, physically in real life. I mean, I think I'm getting over that now, but it's still there. It's like, I'm in my lovely house in Vermont with my lovely wife, and feel very fortunate that I'm actually with someone who I can touch, and talk to, and not worry about social distancing and so on. But as I was on a chat, and I was on a Zoom meeting, and my UPS guy, who I've known for years, came to the door with a package. And I normally, I talk to the guy, and it's like you feel better not. He's not wearing a mask. He's had a long day. He's really busy. Anyway, all that kind of stuff is going on. If you need to model how you want people to show up for yourselves. Not that you're in the same place as them, but basically being by modeling who you are, and sort of being real. I think that is another really important way of getting people who at least will be simpatico with that. And those are the people who, I want to hang out with anyway. I don't really want to hang out with people who are all stuffed shirts and, and like rah, the meeting industry is going to be fine in 6 weeks, and so on. Let's put our good faces on it and so on. Those are not who I really want to hang out with anyway, because unfortunately they're wrong, or misguided at best. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't be optimistic, but you need to be realistic as well.
Yeah, no, there's definitely people I'm talking to, like, that are saying, business needs to open up tomorrow. Like, this is hurting people. Yeah. And at the same time, I'm having conversations with people that are like, in the hospital, in the maternity wing, and saying, please stay home. We need you to do that. We need this to settle down. We need the stress to come off the system. So it's very challenging people, and people are a lot of different places. And that's why I appreciate that I'm speaking to a scientist, because,
well, again, it's important to know what we know. I mean, that's the other thing is, in terms of the pandemic, there are a lot of
right.
There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of good information, but the main difficulty for a lot of people is that information is changing very fast. Yeah. What we know is changing very fast, mainly because there are a lot of scientists doing work as fast as they can. But science is not like, I have this great idea and now I know the answer. It's much more complicated than that. And it's also, it's not an absolute thing. There are things that we are very, very sure of, and there are an awful lot of things at the moment that we don't know much about. And there are quite a few things that we know very little about, and anyone who's opinionated about those things is basically providing misinformation right now because we don't have the facts. So I think that makes it peculiarly difficult for people right now, and we need to make a clear distinction between optimism and about and saying, well, this could happen and this could happen, but also be very, very clear about what we actually know and what we don't yet know, and when we might find out the answers to those questions.
So we actually had a comment. This is Chef Peter Giannini. Through some donors, I'm able to feed about 50 seniors in NYC. They tell me the senior community are really coming together and they have a lot of wisdom. I feed some ex-CEOs and managers of some large companies. They give me a lot of advice. They would like to share their past stories of their dilemma in business. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing this. This idea, and I've really gotten a lot about, and this goes back to the participant kind of driven events and all that jazz. The idea of hearing somebody else's story and getting the inspiration from that. I've been fired up. The last couple of weeks, I've been fired up, and I'm not fired up because the healthcare industry is working so well. Even our government is working so well. I'm not fired up for any of that. I'm fired up because I'm talking to people. I'm connecting to people, and people's stories are incredible. They're inspiring. They're engaging. I'm listening to people, and I'm hearing their ideas, I'm hearing what they do, and I'm getting excited. And Toth Event Staffing is going to transition. We're going to do things differently than we did before based on what I'm learning now. In some respects, it's going to make my job easier, and in other respects, it's going to make the job easier, a lot easier for the staff that I'm working with using technology like Zoom and that sort of thing. It's going to make certain processes just go a lot faster and a lot easier. And I have a whole new mindset for my business because I'm talking to people and engaging with people. And I really recommend and suggest for anybody that, they're struggling right now, connect, be open and connect and say yes and try to engage on some of these online opportunities. Even if you're not used to it, you're going to learn a lot. And if you're
how you learn.
Yeah.
That's how you learn, by doing this stuff. I mean, I've used Zoom for a long time since it was around, but I've used it more in the last 2 months, obviously, than the whole rest of it. It's a time in existence, and you get better at things, and yeah, all this new technology, the first time you use it is the first time, but that's how you get better. But I do want to emphasize this point, that Peter made. I don't know, he doesn't say how these folks, how that community is coming together, but what I've seen just over the last few weeks is people, is groups coming together. I mean, talk about, you and I, I've seen you on 2 meetings in the last couple of weeks, right? And the last time we met otherwise was when last time I was in New York City, and we would, had some time together. That was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe. And that's really cool. I mean, I like hanging out with you and meeting you and other folks. And with Zoom makes that easy now. And I think I'd like to end this by encouraging everyone who is listening to think about those communities, those people who you have something in common with, who you normally restrict yourselves to seeing, physically. And maybe they're a good friend and you really like them, and but you get to see them, once a year because they live somewhere else in the United States, if that. Why not set up a meeting now? Zoom is easy to do, and I've been doing a lot of this, thinking about these different groups that I'm involved with. Let's just put ourselves together and get together. It's very easy to do, and people love it. And if I encourage anyone to do that today, this time will be worth it.
Yeah, no, a lot of people are using it. We're getting our Boy Scout community together on Zoom for my 11-year-old, who's a Boy Scout. Kids, can put this together. I mean, it's fairly simple to use technology, and it works really well. Mm-hmm. And particularly the breakout feature, just keep things in line with what we're talking about. A lot of these Zoom meetings are a little bit challenging, especially if you're looking at a lot of talking heads and transitioning from speaker, or if you're only looking at speaker, which God help you, right? I mean, that's why we have YouTube. Put it up on YouTube. Don't make me sit here and watch a live event and make me uncomfortable. Put me on camera just so I can watch a presentation for a half an hour, an hour. And my tech advice, for all those tech companies out there is don't tell me, show me. So that's a little bit opposite land right there, but and
also make it really short. I mean, if you want to have a meeting that's engaging, you need to have short pieces of content, not more than the science is not more than 10 minutes at the absolute most. 5 minutes is better of content, plus then some active learning, the breakout groups in Zoom or whatever, so that people can actually get that information into their heads, discuss it, come up with other solutions, other ways of looking at it, see what other people think. Then you go on to the next piece of content. You don't ever really want to have people talking for long periods of time at these kinds of meetings. It just doesn't work as well.
So I'm just going to throw your website. I think that's a good way for us to transition out. If people want to participate with you and talk with you, find out about the books, which I really recommend. I mean, things just like the nitty-gritty kind of things, like fishbowl sessions and that solution room thing that we were talking about earlier that, again, just changed my life. I've had so few opportunities to put that kind of meeting together where you get to use the solution room. Looking forward I'm looking very much forward to creating that kind of solution room environment online. I'm looking very much forward to creating really meaningful meetings for organizations where they feel like a personal, they're getting something out of this person to person, peer to peer, which is another way to talk about these conferences, peer to peer conferences, right? Everything from, hey, you want to do a high-end experience where people are touching your product, we can send stuff to your door, put on the swag, you can be a part of the team, but we can also personalize things. So as you're coming into the conference, we can have questions that you answered in advance. Somebody welcomes you into the waiting room of the conference. Make sure that you're 100% comfortable on the tech so that you're representing yourself well. We've set up your profile. You can edit it, so we don't have to worry about all the tech things. We bring you in, and we really have customized the experience just for you. And what do I mean by customized? I mean, I get, put into a session where I got 3 other people. Automatically, there's some highlights on the screen that I filled out that we have some of these talking points in common. And why is that important? Because in a real life event, we would automatically know some of this stuff about each other. So you're facilitating, you're greasing up those kind of experiences so people can talk, and then getting out of the way and letting that connecting happen.
Right. And again, I'll you're showing my website right now on Conferences at Work, and there's a blog there, and there will be a post next Monday on exactly how you do what you've just described in Zoom. So in other words, how can you create customized breakout sessions that actually are that people have chosen, and then visit those sessions as breakouts in Zoom. Zoom is not perfect for that yet, but it can be done, and I'll be writing about how to do that next week. So plenty of things to look out for.
I'm assuming Conferences that Work is the most popular book by sales for you, but you just finished publishing this one just a while ago, right? This is the newest one.
Well, actually, yeah, I would right now that book, this is the second book, The Power for Participation, is probably the most popular book. Conferences that Work's been around for 10 years. It's still a timeless book. And I should mention that if anyone has it, there have been 2 I've issued, and you can get them on my website, 2 free supplements for that book. So they update the book, because a lot of people, I wrote that book and then people gave me a lot of ways of improving it. So yeah, you can download them for free right now if you have that book. But the book that we haven't mentioned very much is the one that came out last November. This is my 3rd book. It's on event crowdsourcing, and it's a book that's sort of that's hyper focused on how you actually create a meeting that reflects what people want and need, which is a part of what I've been doing all along. But this book is basically, focuses entirely on that. But all 3 books have, unique features to them. And so they all are still, really, really relevant in different ways. And are all worth buying. I have to say that, they all have unique content in them, even though the overall kind of thrust of what I've been doing has not changed. The sort of central core focus hasn't changed for a long time. But I figured out ways of doing it better, and have written and continue to write about that.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I know maybe you're not super comfortable with me calling you a scientist, but I think the idea that you're always thinking of a better way. We're in the middle of COVID-19, but realize, 150 years ago, washing your hands wasn't common for performing an operation where you were going into the human body to fix an organ. We've come a long way. We really have. We have a way to go, and that just speaks to the scientific process. There's always a better way to do things, and you don't know something until you know. So get out there and experiment. Adrian, I'm going to let you close this out here. Please give us your parting words. Thank you so much for doing this with me. Hopefully it wasn't a horrible experience, and you'll do it soon.
Oh, no. No, Cameron, I really appreciate you inviting me. I love doing these kinds of interviews because, again, it gives me a chance to share something. And again, ultimately, it's not about promoting myself, but promoting ways of doing meetings that I think that thousands, or probably tens of thousands of people have now experienced are better than the traditional meetings that we've gone to for so long. And there are good reasons why those meetings, why traditional meetings are the way they are. But with all the changes that have happened, particularly in the world of work, and the fact that we can now watch the best speaker in the world speak about something on a YouTube video or on a private video service whenever we like, has really changed the value of going to live meetings of the traditional type. And that's why participation around content, about useful content, and connecting with the people who are finding the people who you really want to connect with at meetings and creating meetings where that's possible has become so valuable. And that's why I'm going to keep on promoting it as long as I have the energy to do so. So Cameron, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I've really enjoyed being here with you.
All right, so we showed off the website. What are other ways that people can get in touch with you, Adrian?
Well, yes, you've got the URL, conferencesthatwork.com, or just Google my name. And on Twitter, I tweet a lot of stuff, my stuff and other people's stuff. A Segar, just A for Adrian and Segar, it should be on your screen, at A Segar, Segar, on Twitter. And the Twitter, I write a lot of stuff on Twitter, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm there as well.
All right, I'm going to try to convince Adrian Segar to get on TikTok now. Thank you. I really appreciate you checking this out. Adrian Segar is the man. He has literally changed my life for the better multiple times. And that I can't say about every good person in my life. And you've done that. And I really encourage people that haven't participated in an event that Adrian Segar has been a part of the build up, and we never even really got a chance to talk about event camp. And I know there's several conversations that are other sessions long, and I'm looking forward to having those conversations with you. If you're ever so kind to allow me to do that with you, I love you. I really appreciate what you do, and thank you.
Love you too, man. Okay, you take care. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.